Ladies and gentlemen, there comes a moment in every soul's journey when the weight of worry feels heavier than the promise of faith. We pace the floors of our minds, we question the timing, and we wonder if God has heard our prayers. But I came to remind you tonight, God has already begun the work. While you were losing sleep, heaven was moving. While you were crying, grace was gathering. The story you're stressing over is already being rewritten by divine hands. So lift your head, rest your heart, and remember, delay is not denial, it's divine design. Worry doesn't change the outcome, faith does. When we worry, we feed the very fear that keeps us from seeing the hand of God already at work. Worry is like a rocking chair. It gives you something to do, but it takes you nowhere. You can spend hours turning thoughts over in your mind, imagining what might happen, what could go wrong, what may never come to pass. And yet not one moment of your worry adds a single solution to your situation. Faith, on the other hand, is motion in stillness. It is trust without evidence, belief without sight, and peace without proof. Faith says, I don't see how, but I know who. It takes your trembling heart and places it in the steady hands of the Creator who never sleeps and never forgets His promise. Worry comes from the illusion that we are in control, that if we think long enough, plan hard enough, or stress deep enough, we can somehow bend the outcome in our favor. But faith releases control and accepts divine authority. It whispers, God, I can't fix this, but I know you can. Worry binds the spirit, faith frees it. When you choose faith, you shift from panic to purpose, from confusion to clarity, from despair to determination. You begin to walk in peace, not because the storm has stopped, but because you know who controls the wind and the waves. The person who lives by faith doesn't live in denial of reality. They live with a deeper awareness of divine reality. They understand that every problem has a purpose and every trial holds a teaching. When the mind worries, it magnifies the problem. It builds mountains out of molehills and turns waiting rooms into war zones. But faith magnifies God, not the issue. It makes you look beyond what you see and hold on to what you believe. Faith says, even if the fig tree does not blossom, even if the harvest fails, I will still trust in the Lord. That is not blindness, that is courage. That is the strength of someone who knows that the unseen realm is more powerful than the seen, that the spiritual reality always precedes the physical result. When you stop worrying, you make room for God to move. When you stop replaying the pain, you allow healing to enter. When you stop trying to control the outcome, you start to experience divine alignment. Worry is heavy. It makes your heart race, your thoughts scatter, your breath shallow. It wears you down slowly, silently. You start each day already tired because your spirit has been wrestling all night with what your faith should have surrendered. Worry drains you of strength that could have been used for hope, for prayer, for creativity, for kindness. Faith restores that strength. Faith says, be still. It reminds you that even when everything around you seems uncertain, God's love is unwavering. You begin to rest not because everything is perfect, but because you know God's plan is. You stop asking why me and start saying use me. You stop asking when and start trusting whenever. When you live by faith, you start to recognize divine fingerprints on ordinary moments. A delay that once frustrated you now feels like divine protection. A door that closed now looks like guidance. A detour that once seemed like distraction now reveals direction. Faith teaches you that not everything lost was meant to stay. Not everything denied was meant to bless, and not everything delayed was meant to disappoint. Sometimes God is saving you from what you thought you wanted because He knows what you truly need. And that is why faith is greater than worry, because faith rests in the wisdom of the unseen hand that writes your story with perfect timing. Faith is not pretending the pain doesn't exist. It's believing that the pain will not have the final word. It's not ignoring the challenge. It's seeing beyond it. It's the calm assurance that even when life feels unfair, God is still faithful. Worry builds walls. Faith builds wings. One keeps you trapped, the other lifts you higher. Faith is the difference between surviving and soaring. When you worry, you move in circles, repeating the same fears, the same doubts, the same questions. When you walk in faith, you move forward, even if your steps are small. Every act of faith, no matter how tiny, invites the miraculous into motion. Worry speaks the language of fear. What if? Faith speaks the language of trust. Even if the answer doesn't come when I expect, even if the road is long, even if I don't understand, I will still believe that God is working. Faith is not about what you see. It's about what you know in your soul. It's the quiet confidence that says, I may not see the way, but I know the waymaker. Faith stands tall when worry falls apart. It remains anchored when the storm rages. It remains grounded when the winds howl. It remembers that the same God who parted the sea, who raised the dead, who fed thousands, still reigns today. When you choose faith, you stop rehearsing defeat and start declaring victory. You begin to speak life over what looks lifeless. You begin to breathe hope into what feels hopeless. Faith changes the atmosphere of your heart. It silences the noise of fear and tunes your spirit to the frequency of peace. Faith doesn't need evidence. It is the evidence, the proof that you trust God's character even when you can't trace His plan. Every person who has ever walked in faith has walked through moments of worry. Even the strongest believers have faced nights of doubt, but faith doesn't mean you never fear. It means you move forward anyway. It means you carry your worry to the throne instead of letting it carry you away. Faith teaches you to replace anxiety with assurance. It shifts your energy from panic to prayer. It allows you to say, I don't have to fix this because it's already in God's hands. That's the power of surrender. The moment you let go, heaven steps in. Faith and worry cannot live in the same house. One must leave for the other to stay. When you feed your faith, your worry starves. When you feed your worry, your faith fades. Every time you choose to trust God in the middle of uncertainty, you strengthen your spiritual muscles. Every time you resist the urge to complain and choose to thank God instead, you align your heart with heaven's rhythm. Faith is built in small moments, the prayer whispered through tears, the gratitude spoken in the storm, the smile offered in the struggle. These moments are seeds, and faith is the garden they grow. When you look back on your life, you'll realize that many things you once worried about never came to pass. All those sleepless nights, all those anxious thoughts, all those fears that whispered you wouldn't make it, and yet, here you are. That's proof of God's faithfulness. The same God who brought you through before will bring you through again. Faith doesn't promise an easy road, but it promises a steady guide. It doesn't guarantee quick answers, but it assures divine outcomes. So when the storm comes, and it will choose faith. When your plans fall apart, choose faith. When the waiting feels endless, choose faith. Because faith is not a feeling, it's a decision. It's waking up each morning and saying, God, I trust you more than I trust my fear. It's laying your worries down and lifting your praise up. It's believing that the one who began a good work in you will be faithful to complete it. Worry keeps your eyes on the problem. Faith lifts your eyes to the promise. Worry keeps you focused on what's missing. Faith keeps you focused on what's coming. Worry makes you forget how big your God is. Faith reminds you that mountains move when you believe. When you stop worrying, you start living. You start noticing the blessings that were always there. You start breathing again, dreaming again, believing again. Because worry blocks your vision, but faith restores your sight. It opens your eyes to grace, to goodness, to divine timing unfolding all around you. Worry demands answers now. Faith says, God's timing is always right. Worry wants to know the plan. Faith wants to know the planner. Worry holds on. Faith lets go. Worry is restless. Faith rests. When you live by faith, you begin to walk with a confidence that can't be explained, a peace that can't be shaken, a joy that doesn't depend on circumstances. You start to move through life with the quiet assurance that everything meant for you will find you, and nothing can steal what God has ordained. And that's the quiet miracle of it all. When you stop worrying and start trusting, you begin to see that God had already been working all along. The things you feared would break you were building you. The moments you thought were wasted were weaving purpose. The prayers you thought were unanswered were being prepared for perfect timing. Because faith doesn't just wait, it watches, it expects, it believes. It looks at the impossible and whispers, "My God is still able." God's silence is not absence, it's preparation. There are moments in every believer's life when heaven seems quiet, when the prayers you've poured out echo back to you unanswered, and when the stillness of the moment feels like abandonment. You kneel, you cry, you wait, and yet nothing moves. It feels as if the sky has closed, as if God has turned away, as if your faith has been misplaced. But the truth, my friend, is that God's silence is not his absence. Silence does not mean he has forgotten you. It means he is preparing something that your heart is not yet ready to hold. Silence is not punishment. It is process. It is the space where your faith matures, where your character strengthens, and where your trust learns to walk without sight. When God is silent, he is still speaking through his stillness. The quiet is not empty, it's filled with divine intention. He is orchestrating details that you cannot see, aligning hearts, shaping opportunities, removing obstacles, and refining your spirit. In those silent seasons, God is not ignoring you, he's preparing you. Because sometimes the answer you're waiting for is not denied, it's delayed for your development. God withholds not to harm, but to strengthen. He knows that premature blessings can crush unprepared hearts. So he waits until your faith is steady enough to hold what you prayed for. We often mistake God's timing for his absence because we live in a world that measures everything by speed. We want quick answers, instant relief, immediate signs, but God does not move according to our clocks. He moves according to his perfect calendar. While we count minutes, he builds moments. While we demand proof, he builds purpose. And in that sacred pause, that divine silence, he teaches us to trust without evidence. He teaches us to lean not on our own understanding, but on his eternal wisdom. Because it's in the silence that faith learns to breathe. When God is quiet, he is working in ways beyond our imagination. Think of the seed buried in the soil. It's silent beneath the ground, unseen, unnoticed, yet within that darkness, life is forming. The silence is not death, it's development. In the same way, God plants promises within the soil of your soul. You may not see movement, but roots are forming. You may not hear a word, but strength is growing. Silence is the sound of preparation, the language of divine patience. It's heaven's way of saying, "Be still, I'm working beneath the surface." God's silence invites you to listen differently. It's not about hearing a voice, it's about sensing his presence. It's learning to discern his movement without noise. Because sometimes God stops speaking audibly so you can start listening spiritually. He shifts your dependence from external signs to internal knowing. He wants you to realize that faith doesn't need confirmation to be certain. It's in the quiet that you begin to recognize His fingerprints in subtle places, a door that closed just in time, a delay that saved you from danger, a small mercy that showed up when you least expect. These are not coincidences. They are quiet conversations between your soul and your Savior. In those moments of silence, God is shaping your response. He's teaching you that your trust cannot be built on emotions alone. He's removing the noise that distracts you, the people that distort your focus, the thoughts that dilute your peace. He uses silence as a filter, separating what's temporary from what's eternal, what's shallow from what's deep, what's fragile from what's faithful. Silence refines you. It burns away impatience and builds endurance. It replaces anxiety with assurance. It teaches you to stand still and see His salvation. When God is silent, He's writing a story that your heart will understand only when it's finished. You may see only fragments now, unanswered prayers, broken dreams, uncertain paths, but each piece has purpose. The silence is where the story is being written in invisible ink. It's where your testimony begins to take shape, though you can't yet read the words. One day, when you look back, you'll realize that every quiet season was God's way of preparing you for a louder victory. Even Jesus faced divine silence. In the Garden of Gethsemane, when He prayed in anguish, heaven seemed still. Yet that silence did not mean abandonment. It meant fulfillment was near. God was not absent. He was aligning the greatest act of redemption in human history. If Christ had to walk through silence to reach resurrection, so must we. Silence precedes revelation. The quiet night always comes before the morning light. It's the waiting that gives meaning to the arrival. In God's silence, He's building a foundation beneath your faith. He's teaching you to depend not on signs and wonders, but on His word alone. Because faith that depends on noise will falter in stillness, but faith that thrives in silence cannot be shaken by storms. When God stops answering in the way you expect, it's because He's teaching you to see Him in ways you never imagined. He's shifting your attention from outcomes to intimacy. He wants you to seek His heart, not just His hand. The silent seasons are often the most sacred. They strip away distractions and draw you into deeper communion. You learn to pray differently, not with demands, but with devotion. You begin to talk less and listen more. You start to feel His peace in places where you once only felt His absence. You start to sense His guidance not through thunder, but through stillness. Because God is not always in the earthquake or the fire sometimes. He's in the gentle whisper. When you embrace God's silence, you begin to see it as a gift. It's in that silence that your soul detoxes from the noise of the world. It's in that silence that you realize your worth is not tied to what's happening around you, but to what's happening within you. Silence transforms your waiting into worship. It teaches you that unanswered prayers are not wasted prayers, they are stored prayers. They are seeds that will bloom in the right season. There is beauty in divine pauses. Think of a composer writing music. The rest between notes are as important as the notes themselves. Without silence, the melody loses meaning. In the same way, God's silence gives rhythm to your life. It teaches you when to pause, when to breathe, when to trust. The spaces between His words are where your soul learns harmony. It's where you learn that peace isn't the absence of sound, it's the presence of God. Sometimes God is silent because He's already spoken. He wants you to act on what you've already heard instead of waiting for something new. He's testing your obedience, your consistency, your commitment. He's seeing whether your faith will hold steady when the voice stops echoing. Silence is not a sign of neglect, it's a measure of trust. God trusts you enough to walk in the dark with the light He's already given. And sometimes God's silence is protection. He closes His mouth because your heart is not ready for what His mouth would reveal. If He told you everything now, you might run from the very path that leads to your destiny. If He showed you every challenge ahead, you might quit before the victory came. So He stays silent, not to hide, but to shield. He conceals what could crush you until you're strong enough to carry it. That's love in disguise. That's mercy wrapped in mystery. There are seasons when silence stretches so long that you begin to doubt your purpose. You start to question if your prayers matter. You start to feel invisible. But the truth is, even in silence, you are seen. You are held. God is nearer in the quiet than you think. The silence is where He tests your roots, not to expose your weakness, but to deepen your strength. A tree that grows through storms grows strong, but a tree that grows through stillness grows deep. And depth is what sustains you when the winds return. When life feels still, you must remember that heaven is never idle. The same God who formed the universe out of nothing is working. In the unseen corners of your circumstance, you may not see movement, but things are shifting. You may not hear His voice, but His hand is guiding you. You may not feel His presence, but His Spirit surrounds you. God's silence is often the sacred space between your prayer and His promise. It's the hallway between asking and answering, between sowing and reaping, between weeping and rejoicing. And though the hallway feels long, it always leads to something holy. God's silence stretches your faith until it fits your future. It takes your small understanding and expands it. It takes your fragile patience and strengthens it. It takes your restless heart and steadies it. Every silent moment is a lesson in trust, a training in endurance, a test of surrender. Silence builds believers who can stand firm when life makes no sense. It builds warriors who can worship without words, dream without details, believe without evidence. Even creation understands the power of divine silence. Before the dawn breaks, there's a sacred stillness that covers the earth. Before seeds burst through the soil, there's a deep quiet beneath the ground. Before resurrection, there's a tomb. Before transformation, there's waiting. Silence always comes before the miracle. It is not the absence of God's power, it's the preparation for its display. So when the world grows quiet and heaven seems far, remember silence is sacred. It's God's way of teaching you to stand still in faith while He works in the unseen. It's the womb of miracles, the classroom of trust, the proving ground of belief. God's silence is not distance, it's design. It's His way of shaping your heart to hold the blessing that's coming. Because when God is silent, He is never absent. He is only preparing you for what only faith can see. Every delay carries divine direction. When life slows down, when prayers seem postponed, when doors refuse to open no matter how much you knock, it can feel like time itself has turned against you. You begin to wonder if you missed your moment, if you took a wrong turn, or if heaven has forgotten your name. But in truth, a delay is not a detour from destiny. It is part of the design. What looks like a pause is often a preparation. What feels like denial is often direction. And what seems like waiting is often God aligning everything for your good. Every divine delay carries purpose hidden within its quiet unfolding, and it is in those pauses that heaven writes its most powerful lessons. We live in a world that worships speed. We want results now. We crave answers instantly, and we often confuse motion with progress. But God does not measure movement by minutes. He measures maturity by moments. His timeline is eternal, not emotional. When He delays, it's not because He's forgotten you, it's because He's forming something in you. He's developing your patience, strengthening your character, and stretching your faith until it fits your future. God doesn't want you to arrive too soon and crumble under the weight of what you prayed for. He wants you strong enough to carry it, wise enough to steward it, and humble enough to honor it. That's why every delay carries divine direction. It's the language of heaven saying, I'm not denying you, I'm developing you. Delay is where God hides the details that will make sense later. You may not see the path, but you are being led. You may not understand the slowness, but you are being guided. God's pace is always perfect because He sees what you cannot. He knows the traps that wait ahead, the storms you're not yet ready to face, the lessons you haven't yet learned. So when He holds you back, He's not rejecting you, He's redirecting you. Every delay is a divine intersection, a moment where heaven adjusts your route to protect your purpose. You may have wanted a straight line, but God's map includes curves for your correction. When you feel delayed, it's easy to grow restless. The human heart doesn't like waiting because waiting exposes what we truly trust. It reveals whether our faith is rooted in outcomes or in God Himself. A delay is not just about time, it's about transformation. God delays to refine, to reveal, to reset. In the waiting, you see what still controls you. You realize whether you've surrendered or whether you're still struggling to hold the pen that only God can write with. The delay is a mirror that reflects your soul back to you. It shows you whether your belief can outlast your impatience. The delay of God is not the denial of God. Throughout Scripture, every great move of God was preceded by a period of waiting. Abraham waited for the promised son. Joseph waited in prison for a vision to unfold. Moses waited in the wilderness before leading a nation. David waited for the crown, though he had already been anointed. Even Jesus waited 30 years before beginning His ministry. Waiting is not wasted time. It is divine timing. It is the season where purpose ripens. It is where God tests whether your trust is stronger than your timeline. Every delay has a divine clock ticking behind it, and not 1 second is meaningless. When God delays, He is teaching you the rhythm of reliance. You stop rushing ahead and start resting in His pace. You begin to understand that your timeline was too small for His vision. The thing you thought you were ready for might have destroyed you if you had received it prematurely. So God withholds not to punish, but to preserve. He waits until your heart is anchored enough in faith that blessing won't become your burden. There's a weight to favor, and only those who have endured delay can carry it without falling into pride. The waiting seasons forge humility, and humility attracts heaven. Sometimes God delays because He is rearranging what surrounds you. There are people, opportunities, and environments that must shift before your promise can safely land. If He released your blessing too early, it might collide with unprepared places, so He delays until everything aligns. That's why the delay feels frustrating, because it's happening in dimensions you cannot see. While you're waiting, God is working in the unseen. He's removing the wrong connections, preparing the right ones, opening unseen paths, and closing unseen dangers. The delay is your protection in disguise. When we experience delay, we often pray harder for speed, but God invites us to pray for strength. He wants us to learn endurance, the sacred ability to trust, even when time stretches beyond comfort. The delay trains you to walk by faith and not by sight. It's the slow fire that purifies motives, reshapes priorities, and deepens gratitude. Those who have never waited never truly appreciate fulfillment. It's the waiting that gives value to arrival. When what you prayed for finally comes, you recognize it not as luck, but as divine faithfulness. You understand why God delayed, because He was crafting not just your blessing, but your becoming. A divine delay often feels like stillness, But spiritually, it's movement in another dimension. It's God positioning everything behind the scenes so that when He releases your next step, nothing will be missing or misplaced. The delay is like the pause before a symphony's crescendo. It builds anticipation, heightens sensitivity, and ensures every instrument is tuned before the music rises. In the same way, your life's pauses are not interruptions. They are intentional alignments. Think of how a seed grows. Once planted, it disappears beneath the soil. You see nothing for weeks, maybe months, and you begin to wonder if anything is happening at all. But under the ground, roots are spreading deep, preparing to support what will soon break the surface. If the seed sprouted too soon, it would wither without foundation. In the same way, God uses delay to deepen your roots before He reveals your fruit. The unseen preparation ensures the visible manifestation will last. Many times, God's delays expose what we idolize. We begin to see whether we love the promise more than the promiser. The longer we wait, the clearer our motives become. Delay detoxes your desire. It purifies your pursuit. It reminds you that faith is not a transaction, it's a relationship. You don't trust God because He moves quickly. You trust Him because He moves rightly. And when your heart learns that, every delay becomes bearable because you know there's purpose wrapped in the pause. Delay also deepens gratitude. If God gave you everything instantly, your heart would grow numb to the miracle. But when you've had to wait, when you've wrestled with uncertainty, when you've prayed through nights of silence, and finally God moves, your soul explodes in gratitude. You cherish every detail, every moment, every blessing because you know what it cost. You to keep believing. Delay makes you value what you once took for granted. It's the furnace where appreciation is formed. Every delay carries a hidden message, trust me. It's heaven's invitation to walk without visible evidence, to believe when logic breaks down. When God delays, He is shaping your ability to hold hope, even when nothing seems to happen. It's easy to believe when everything moves fast, but it takes spiritual maturity to believe when life moves slow. That's the faith that moves mountains, not noisy faith, but quiet faith, rooted in patience and peace. There are moments when delay will tempt you to doubt your worth. You'll see others advancing, celebrating, receiving, and you'll wonder if God skipped over you. But divine delay is never divine rejection. The same God who blesses them is preparing something custom-made for you. Your timeline is not theirs. Your journey is not theirs. The delay you're living through is the birthplace of a blessing they will never understand, because what God builds in the waiting cannot be replicated. The soil of delay produces a harvest unique to your purpose. God's delays often protect you from premature exposure. He knows that if certain doors open too soon, you'd walk through them with unhealed wounds. If certain opportunities came early, you'd step into them without wisdom. Delay is divine insulation. It keeps you from self-destruction. It ensures that when you finally arrive, you can sustain what you've received. God's goal is not to deliver fast, it's to deliver lasting. He delays because He desires that what He gives you will not fade with time, but flourish with purpose. In the stillness of delay, you learn to worship differently. You stop praising God for what He gives and start praising Him for who He is. Your faith matures from God, do this for me, to God. Even if you don't, I'll still trust you. That is the transformation delay creates it. Replaces conditional faith with covenant faith. It turns impatience into intimacy. It replaces anxiety with assurance. It teaches you to rest in God's presence rather than chase His performance. Every delay carries layers of divine meaning. Sometimes it's correction redirecting your path from danger. Sometimes it's preparation equipping you for responsibility. Sometimes it's revelation, helping you see yourself more clearly. And sometimes it's simply protection, God shielding you from something your heart doesn't yet recognize as harmful. Whatever the reason, the delay is always love in disguise. It's God's mercy wrapped in patience. It's heaven's way of saying, you're not behind, you're being built. Even nature reflects this divine pattern. The longest days of winter make way for the richest blooms of spring. The cold stretches time, and yet beneath the frost, life stirs. Delay is like that season, cold, quiet, and slow, but necessary for growth. It's the womb of new beginnings, where dreams develop in darkness until their appointed time. In moments of delay, faith must become your anchor. You may not control the timing, but you can control your trust. You can choose peace over panic, prayer over pressure, and patience over despair. Because every moment of waiting is a sacred investment. Every day that passes without an answer is another layer of strength added to your soul. Every delay is a divine classroom where your spirit learns to depend completely on the one who never delays without reason. Delay does not destroy destiny, it delivers it. It creates space for divine perfection to unfold. God knows what must happen before your promise appears. He knows which hearts must soften, which circumstances must shift, which seasons must end. The delay is His way of ensuring that when your blessing arrives, it will not be fragile. It will be firm, finished, and full of glory. And so, when you find yourself in a season where nothing seems to move, where prayers hang in the air and time feels slow, remember that every delay is divine direction in disguise. The pause is not punishment, it's preparation. The waiting is not wasted, it's weaving. God is not late, He is aligning. Because in His world, timing is not measured by clocks, but by readiness. And when your spirit is ready, the delay will end and destiny will begin. When you trust His timing, you find your peace. Trusting God's timing is one of the hardest yet most freeing lessons a soul can learn. We live in a world that moves fast, that celebrates instant results, and that measures success by speed. But God moves differently. His pace is not rushed. His plan is not random, and His timing is never late. He operates outside of human calendars and beyond the limits of earthly clocks. When He says, "Not yet," it is not rejection, it is divine synchronization. It means that heaven is aligning what you asked for with what you are ready for. And when you learn to rest in that rhythm, when you stop trying to force what only God can fulfill, you discover a peace that no storm can steal. Peace does not come from having everything happen when you want it. Peace comes from knowing that everything will happen when it's meant to. There is a holy stillness that comes when you finally stop running ahead of God and start walking beside Him. Trusting His timing means believing that delays are not denials, that pauses are not punishments, and that silence is not absence. It is knowing that even when you cannot see movement, the hand of God is still writing. The clock of heaven never stops ticking, even when the seconds of earth feel still. When you trust His timing, you release the anxiety of needing to control. You stop trying to manipulate outcomes or rush seasons. You learn to breathe again, to rest again, to let go of what isn't meant to unfold yet. Because peace is not found in speed, it's found in surrender. And surrender is not weakness, it's wisdom. It's the understanding that the one who created time also controls it, and that your story will unfold exactly when it should. When your heart finally lets go of urgency and embraces divine timing, it enters a rest that surpasses human understanding. There is a sacred beauty in waiting. When you trust God's timing, you start to see that the waiting itself is a blessing. It is in the waiting that faith deepens, patience grows, and character strengthens. You begin to see that what felt like delay was actually preparation for the greater purpose, the deeper love, the higher calling that God had in mind all along. The time you spend wondering when is often the very time God spends shaping you into someone who can carry what's coming. If He gave it too soon, you might mishandle it. If He gave it too late, you might miss it. But because He is perfect, His timing is always precise. Trusting His timing means understanding that your current position is not permanent. It's preparation. You may not be where you want to be, but you are exactly where God needs you to be for this moment. Every closed door, every unanswered prayer, every unexpected turn, all of it fits into a divine schedule that your human mind cannot yet comprehend. Sometimes what looks like delay is actually protection. God holds you back, not to punish you, but to keep you safe from things you don't see coming. Sometimes He slows you down because the path ahead isn't clear yet. Sometimes He withholds what you desire because He's building something better than you imagined. When you learn to trust His timing, you stop comparing your journey to others. You stop measuring your progress by someone else's clock. You understand that your pace is sacred and personal. You are not behind. You are being built. You are not forgotten. You are being formed. What God is preparing for you cannot be rushed, and what God has ordained for you cannot be stolen. Comparison robs peace because it shifts your focus from divine timing to human timing. But when your eyes return to heaven, peace returns to your heart. You begin to rest in the truth that what's meant for you will never require competition, only completion. Trusting His timing also means learning the language of patience. Patience is not passive, it is powerful. It's the ability to stand still in faith when everything around you says move. It's the discipline to wait with expectancy rather than frustration. It's the strength to say, God, I may not understand this pause, but I trust that it's purposeful. That's where peace grows, not in the absence of waiting, but in the confidence that waiting is working for your good. Every moment of delay is a brick in the foundation of destiny. Every pause is a note in the symphony of purpose. Sometimes God's timing disrupts your plans. He closes doors you wanted to walk through. He reroutes paths you thought were certain. He delays dreams you thought were ready. But when you trust His timing, you begin to realize that every interruption is an introduction to something greater. What you saw as an ending, He sees as a redirection. What you thought was rejection was actually redirection towards something more fitting for your future. Peace comes when you stop fighting His hand and start following His flow. When you learn to rest in God's timing, you stop begging Him to hurry and start thanking Him for holding back what isn't yet ready. You begin to see that premature blessings can become burdens. A relationship started too early can wound the heart. A success achieved too quickly can destroy humility. An opportunity received before maturity can collapse character. God's timing ensures protection as much as provision. He knows that the right thing at the wrong time can cause more harm than the wrong thing at the right time. That's why peace lives in trust, not in timing you control, but in timing you release. When you trust God's timing, your perspective changes. You no longer measure progress by what you see. You measure it by what you sense. You begin to recognize small signs of growth that others overlook. You feel the quiet strengthening of your spirit, the deepening of your wisdom, the refining of your endurance. You realize that though nothing seems to be moving outwardly, everything is shifting inwardly. The waiting is not empty. It's full of unseen progress. God often moves most in moments that look still. Trusting His timing means learning to be still without giving up. Stillness is not inactivity. It's inner calm. It's the peace that allows you to say, Even here, I'm safe. It's the courage to stay faithful even when you don't see results. You may not hear the answer yet, but your faith tells you it's already being written. You may not feel progress yet, but your spirit knows something sacred is forming beneath the surface. And that knowing, that quiet assurance, is where peace lives. There are moments when trusting God's timing will test every part of your patience. You will feel stretched, restless, and tempted to rush ahead. But every time you choose to wait instead of worry, to pray instead of push, to rest instead of run, your spirit grows stronger. You start to see that trust is not about understanding the plan, it's about trusting the planner. You begin to release the need for control and embrace the peace that comes from surrender. Because true peace is not found in knowing every step, but in knowing who guides them. When you truly trust His timing, you find yourself walking lighter. The burden of deadlines, expectations, and pressure begins to fade. You stop asking, "When, God?" and start saying, "Whenever, Lord." You learn to flow with grace instead of fight against it. You become present in the moment instead of lost in the future. Trusting His timing frees you from the anxiety of trying to make life happen before it's time. It allows you to rest in the truth that if it hasn't happened yet, it's because it's not time yet, and when it is time, nothing will stop it. Sometimes the timing of God feels slow because He's waiting for your heart to align with His purpose. There are lessons that cannot be rushed, lessons of humility, forgiveness, surrender, and gratitude. The time it takes is not wasted. It's sacred. God uses waiting to shape wisdom. The longer you trust His pace, the clearer your peace becomes. Because peace is not the absence of motion, it's the presence of divine order. When you trust the timing of the one who sees the end from the beginning, you no longer fear the middle. You stop rushing to the next chapter because you trust the author knows when to turn the page. When you walk in trust, you begin to see delays as direction, slow seasons as shaping, and silence as strategy. You understand that every not yet is a yes in the making. You stop demanding proof and start walking in faith. You stop counting days and start collecting lessons. You begin to value process as much as progress. And in that space, peace flows like a river. It's not loud, not dramatic, but steady, the kind of peace that anchors you even when life feels uncertain. Trusting His timing gives you eyes to see the beauty in divine order. You start to realize that everything in creation follows timing: the sunrise, the tide, the seasons, the heartbeat. Nothing in nature rushes, and yet everything happens perfectly on time. The same Creator who orchestrates the rhythm of the universe is orchestrating your life. If the ocean can trust His timing, if the stars can wait for their turn to shine, so can you. The peace you seek is not found in getting what you want sooner. It's found in believing that what's meant for you will never miss you. There is a kind of peace that cannot be explained, only experienced when you truly surrender to divine timing. It's the peace that lets you sleep while others panic. It's the peace that allows you to smile even when you're still waiting. It's the peace that whispers, "I don't know how, but I know who." That peace is born from trust. Trust in the God who has never been late, who has never failed, who has never made a mistake. When you trust His timing, you stop being ruled by impatience. You stop forcing outcomes that aren't meant to be forced. You stop carrying the weight of what's not yet ready. You allow life to unfold with grace instead of grasping at control. You start living in flow with divine rhythm, where every step feels guided and every pause feels purposeful. You begin to live in peace not because you have everything you want, but because you believe that everything you need is on its way, right on time. Trusting His timing doesn't mean you stop dreaming or desiring it. It means you stop doubting. You continue to hope, to plan, to believe, but without the heaviness of fear. You start to say, God, I know you're preparing something far greater than I can imagine, and I'll wait as long as it takes. That's where peace lives, not in knowing the when, but in knowing the who. Because when you trust His timing, you no longer fear delay. You embrace it as part of divine order. You come to understand that peace is not the absence of waiting, it's the presence of faith in waiting. It's the calm that fills your heart when you know that God's hands are holding the clock of your life. You stop rushing the process because you know His timing produces perfection. The peace that comes from trust is steady, gentle, and unshakable. It carries you through the waiting, the silence, the slow seasons, and reminds you that the promise is not postponed, only preparing to appear. When you trust His timing, you stop chasing peace because you've already found it within Him.